So, welcome everyone. My name is Nick. I'm based in Tokyo. I work with Nikkei, the big media association. We're going to address regulatory issues in this panel. Of course, we're going to talk about a very hot topic in the blockchain world, in the crypto world, about the state of regulation, what are the issues, and of course, this sweet spot about how to strike the balance between, business disruption and then regulation. Let me introduce my co-panelists. We have a really stellar lineup today. We have people that cover everything from corporate to investment to legal to legislative, perhaps, and then we also have people that work in very different jurisdictions, from the US to Singapore to Bermuda and Australia and Korea and America. Let's start from my right side. I'll maybe introduce each other one by one. Maja Vujinovic, CEO of OGroup and a fintech investor. And then next to her is Joshua Ho, co-founder of QCP Capital based in Singapore. On my left side is Loretta Joseph, fintech advisor to the Bermuda government, industry chair at the Australian Digital Commerce. Then Samuel Yim from Kim and Chang, the biggest law firm in Korea, right? Maybe you guys, it was best if you introduce yourselves briefly about your background and what you do one by one. Maybe we can start from Maja here on the right and then move.
Thanks, Nick. Good morning, everybody. My name is Maja Vujinovic. I've been in the space since 2011. I started in Bitcoin while I was in Africa. The first kind of wave of bleeding edge innovation entry point for me was mobile technology. In our early 20s, I went to start a mobile tech platform in Africa. So I've seen kind of regulation there and a change of regulation, and then now seen it from a perspective of being a CIO at General Electric, a large public company that I was trying to force in some way or shape or form to use a Bitcoin, mine cryptocurrencies, get involved in blockchain, and now as an investor, of course, we do equity and crypto investing. So it's quite interesting to see that from different point of views, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Josh?
I'm Josh. I'm one of the co-founders of QCP Capital. We're based in Singapore. I actually used to be a lawyer, not a very good one, a long time ago. And so I switched into an entrepreneurial profession, launching e-commerce businesses with Rocket Internet, and then Uber and Gojek and other such operations around Southeast Asia and Latin America. I came into the space more from a traditional route as a VC, investing early on and taking a very long view of the space, as we still do as a fund. So we run a couple of funds out of Singapore, and OTC, as well as a market-making desk. And we also provide treasury management for the companies we work with. We've been around for going on 2 years now, and Southeast Asia is kind of our home turf.
Loretta?
Morning, everyone. My name is Loretta Joseph. I'm the Industry Advisory Chair of the Australian Digital Chamber of Commerce. I'm the Advisory Chair of the Serbian Chamber of Commerce. I'm the Regulatory and FinTech Advisor to the Bermuda government, to the Mauritian government, and to the South Australian Premier. And I'm also the Blockchain Advisor to the OECD. I got into the space in 2013 because of my regulator in Australia. I actually looked at building a clearing settlement system with blockchain before I looked at the cryptocurrency side. I tried to buy some Bitcoin in 2013, and it was quite arduous. So my association helped write the first self-regulation for Bitcoin. We then worked very closely with the Australian government. We had the double GST taken off digital asset transactions, and last year we had all the exchanges put under the anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism body in Australia. Since then, I've been working with the Bermuda government, the Mauritian government, and the OECD. In Bermuda, we've just legislated law. So we actually have an ICO bill and a digital asset bill, which has passed and enacted. So hopefully, as one of the first countries in the world to actually regulate the space, it's going to be a really interesting year. So that's me.
Thank you. Samuel?
Hi, my name is Samuel Yim. I'm an attorney at Kim and Chang. I'm part of our firm's fintech group, and I am one of the major, I play a part as part of the cryptocurrency and blockchain initiative for our firm, which we feel is very valuable, and we are investing a lot of time and effort to help shape the legal landscape here in Korea. Our firm is quite large. It's the largest firm in Korea. And you know, in addition to our legal services, we advocate for our clients to advocate for their interests to the government regulators. And we also are consulted by the government regarding cryptocurrency issues as well. And so we have a multifaceted practice where it's a very holistic, one-stop service kind of practice where you could get all your interests to have your legal needs met in Korea. Prior to joining Kim and Chang, I used to be a U.S. Army officer, and then I went to law school. I started off in New York, where I witnessed the global financial crisis in 2008, and then I went to Hong Kong, Singapore, and now I'm based out of Asia. And by trade, prior to the cryptocurrency, I did most securities laws, and I'm very fortunate and glad to be here today with the panel.
Thank you. I think maybe we can continue with Samuel because it's a bit of a home turf advantage here.
Okay.
And just have us give a brief overview of how would you define the current regulatory situation in Korea. A lot of people, I'm based in Japan, but also a lot of people outside of Korea know are looking at this space. Korea is a very active place. What's happening right now? What stage are we at now?
Yeah, for Korea, I think it's been a very fluctuating regulatory environment. I think starting from late last year when there was a lot of announcements of banning ICOs in Korea, prohibited, and then there were just a lot of rumors about cryptocurrency exchange being taken down, and there was a lot of negative sentiment because of the phenomenal growth in cryptocurrency here in Korea. I think now, there's definitely a more positive stance by the Korean government. By nature, I'm an optimist in Korean regulations. I mean, if you look at the history, where Korea started in 1950, being one of the poorest countries in the world, to one of the wealthiest countries in the world, I think they have really good government policies and regulations to match the needs of the Korean economy. And so, by nature, I am optimistic that sensible regulations will come out in the near future. The Korean government, we are aware they're studying it very, very intensely right now. And there's different stakeholders in the Korean government that has, a say in how the regulations should apply. So, for example, you have the Financial Supervisory Service, the Ministry of Finance, Strategy and Finance, the Bank of Korea, and also the Ministry of Justice. So all these stakeholders have to get involved to see how these regulations work. So it's not a very simple, here's a law and let's implement it, because there's an FX component of cryptocurrency here in Korea when you send, and then there's a securities aspect. Is it a security or not, when you issue these ICO tokens? And so I think it's coming pretty soon. I think it'll be introduced sometime before the end of the year. I don't think it'll be as, laissez-faire like Singapore, nor I don't think it's going to be as, regulated as United States or Japan. So I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. And I think the Korean government does recognize that blockchain technology and related to crypto technology is a very important element of their initiative of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where you have AI, automation. And so they do recognize that. They do want to foster a healthy environment in Korea to become the next leader in this type of tech. And they're aware that Korea does lead in cryptocurrency trades around the world, one of the largest. And so I think sensible regulations are going to come out in the near future.
Maybe, well, on the other side of the panel, Maja, you travel a lot, you invest all over the world, but you're based in the U.S. Likewise to Korea, how would you say is in a few rough lines, the current situation from you as an investor perspective, the regulatory landscape in the U.S. right now?
Yeah, we have an entity in the US, but we also have one in Europe that allows us to play around just because of what Samuel just said. It's very, in my opinion, a little backwards, but a lot of people will disagree with that. I think, look, US has come out clearly and said that everything is a security, full stop. Bitcoin is a commodity. And they're going to come hard on some things that have been done, and even retroactively. So IRS is already doing that, and U.S. the SEC is going to do that as well. So we have a token economics firm in addition, so we structure tokens and we look at it. We are very careful about what we do. We tell our clients everything is a security, despite the fact of how I feel personally. So there are two views of how I feel. One is respect the laws of what they are, navigate and treat everything correctly. On the other side, I'm very controversial to say that most of our laws in the US will, in my opinion, need to be relooked at. This industry exists and its momentum is there because we want to see more equitable world, and utility token creates innovation. Security token is not an innovation. So utility is what drives innovation. And if we're going to just shut that down and put everything under security, then we're just almost going back to square one. So I think US has come out, even though they haven't come out officially, right, and pointing certain things, I mean, we know where they stand. And so that's kind of a general summary.
Thank you. Josh, you, as Samuel said, there's quite a laissez-faire approach in Singapore. You're based in Singapore. You obviously deal a lot, and you obviously came across MAS regulations and so on. What's your comment on that? Do you think Singapore is going in the right direction? It's clearly attracting a lot of attention.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I think what's happening in Korea is super encouraging, right? Best foot forward. The fact that it's been banned and potentially unbanned at some point, it's the longest time that anyone's spent actually working and thinking about regulations. In Singapore, it's kind of the same case, although I think there's some misconceptions to clear up. It remains unregulated in Singapore. There are some papers that have been put forward. People are right now clamoring around some of the licenses that will be released later in the year. But as it stands, the uncertainty is still lingering over how funds should operate, how individual investors should be regulated, so on and so forth. But real talk, right? I mean, in Singapore, at the end of the day, this is something they've done time and time again. They'll wait for a bigger jurisdiction to come in, drop their regulations, slip in behind, something more relaxed, and then everyone will come there because all the money will flow, right? It's a massive financial hub. A lot of fintech hubs around the world that want to replicate the Singapore model will do the same. Hence, you see what's happening in Bermuda, and Malta, and Gibraltar, so on and so forth. But fair to say that not many hold water as good as a Swiss or a Singaporean license would on a global stage. So I think a lot of people will eventually come to see that they've got an ideal location, good talent, and it's the sort of, it's like baking a cake, right? All the good ingredients are there for people to establish in Singapore.
I guess, yeah, the reputation and the center was building for so long. I mean, this is a great opportunity for Singapore to continue along this way. Well, you mentioned they're waiting for a bigger legislation to come in. They're waiting for Loretta, I guess, to come in. And
like
Loretta's
that, yeah.
helped. You helped writing and advise on some of the newest regulations and legislation on ICOs and blockchain and crypto overall. Can you give us a brief overview of what you did in Bermuda, for example, as this is, I think, the most mature of the ones that you worked on?
Yeah, so I'm Australian, if you can't tell. So the beauty of me and doing this in the space since 2012, there are 52 countries around the world that have the legacy, or maybe it's the opportune moment, have the British law system. So the big thing I found in this space is, there hasn't been any regulation, and it's been hard to harmonise the world. And people coming out with different perspectives on what a utility token is, what a securities token is. It's been very difficult because we all have different law systems. So when I met the Premier of Bermuda at Davos, and he said to me, "Can you please come to Bermuda tomorrow?" And I sort of looked at him and said no. Consequently, I did. And we sat down. I work with a guy called Joseph Weinberg, who's the chairman of Shift. And we went to Bermuda and we sat down with the policymakers and the government and all the stakeholders, and we wrote law and legislated it in 3 months. So I think we're the first country in the world that's done that. Interestingly, because technologists are not policymakers and policymakers are not technologists. So we've had this real gap in the market for the last 5 years that people have been writing regulations, and regulations are not law. You can self-regulate, but until you actually enact them in law, you don't have anything to follow. So in Bermuda, we worked out what a utility token was, what a hybrid token was, and what a security token it was. Because I don't think regulators have been particularly comfortable with looking at how this new innovation is. So if we can have regulation that allows innovation but sets the rules and the standards for the ecosystem, most people will comply. So in Bermuda, you know, we wrote some really tough regulation. If we need the beneficial ownership of the ICO, it's jailable. If we can't trace the source of funds in Bermuda, you go to jail and it's a $10 million fine. But it may sound harsh, but you know, Bermuda is a really small country, it's 60,000 people. It's got a really good reputation because of the reinsurance market, and I was very mindful to walk into a country and destroy that. So you have to look at the KYC, AML, it's a very important element of the cryptocurrency world. And so I sat down with the OECD, we've spoken to the Financial Stability Board, we've worked with FATF. So we wrote regulations that won't upset the brand of Bermuda, and I think it's some of the best legislation in the world. We also enacted a Digital Asset Act. So I think calling Bitcoin originally was quite bad. If we had have called it Zen token, no one would have cared. But the minute you start mixing money supply with a cryptocurrency, people get confused. So I think the term digital asset is better. And I've spoken to the likes of FATF and everyone, and we're looking at maybe taking out virtual currency and making everything a digital asset. So if we can harmonise the law, and I think Malta, Bermuda and Mauritius are in really good positions because although they're small, they have exactly the same law system. It's all British law. So to have a global rollout now and the standardisation of harmonisation of regulations helps the ecosystem because you can now scale into mature markets, but it also gives regulators and governments comfort that there are laws. So, but the other thing about Bermuda was when people were doing ICOs in Bermuda, before there were any regulation. And that's dangerous because you've had people coming in doing ICOs that weren't regulated. So they didn't run at this going, oh, we want to be a country of 60,000 people that's just going to regulate this because it looks good. It was because they needed to keep the jurisdiction safe from nefarious actors and to have some sort of guidelines for the ecosystem. So I think my personal view is if we can roll this out around a number of countries this year, because Malta's Europe, Mauritius is Africa and India, and Bermuda is North America, then we can hopefully have treaties of technology between countries, not treaties of tax anymore, and we can passport companies in blockchain and cryptocurrencies between all these jurisdictions, which really opens up the globe.
Thank you. Well, let's talk now about a bit of hindering innovation part. And Sam, you explained about the Korean approach and the American approach. Perhaps, does this, of course, in the long run, it makes sense, but how do you value the missed opportunities, perhaps? The missed, you know, Singapore is getting a lot of business right now. A lot of ICOs are happening there. A lot of money is going through there. Is this a big lost opportunity for countries like Korea and US, or is it also, but is it going to backfire? That's what I'm like.
My view is that if you have a good, you know, token or good product, you're not going to miss. It's gonna work out in the end. You know, whether you're the first mover, I think in the technology space is not necessarily that important. I guess an example is Yahoo was one of the first movers, but the second player, Google, became the winner because it had the best technology. So I think this rushing to get the money in and get the money now for innovation is not as important right now. If you have good technology, work on your technology. If it's going to play itself out and the technology is going to bring users so that your token will survive. On the other hand, money coming in, but there's another, on the flip side is money lost. You know, I hate to break the news, but you know, it's more likely than not that most of these tokens, most of these ICOs that are there are going to fail, just to sober.
Shocking.
Yeah, just like, you know, Internet 1.0, right? And so with that understanding, money coming in, but there will be investors' loss of money as well. So there's gains and losses, and so it's not always good for the economy, especially when the tokens are highly risky, highly volatile, and there's no guarantee of future returns. Another point, you know, because this is, you know, we have a lot of ICO audiences right now, I think one of the key issues that I want to touch upon that I always advise is that if you do an ICO, that's fine. And whether it's in Singapore or the United States, that's fine. But as we know, there is a trend, at least in the United States, and in some parts of the world where they're considering ICOs as securities. And so when you issue a tokens or even a SAFT, it could be considered security as an investment contract under the Howey test. It could be arguable that that could be applied to Korea as well, because Korea has a similar version of the Howey test. Fine. But the problem is that if you do get this money and you do very little with it, or you're marketing too much but little innovation, there's going to be a certain point in time where the token holders will realize maybe a couple years from now, like, what is the value of my token? I bought it for 10 cents, it's worth nothing. And so when you go back 2 or 3 years down the line looking long term, there is a risk for the token holders to file a lawsuit against the ICO organizers based on the legal basis of selling the unregistered securities to retail investors. And so I do caution that, the wind is changing that way. There is a balance between innovation, but if you're doing nothing with the funds that you have, and you're not really innovating and creating stuff that is useful for the token economy, then you're exposing yourself at risk for future lawsuits.
Yeah, but I mean, on that point though, I mean, all regulators can really do is tell consumers things are risky. The consumer protection point is very, very important, but technology has changed in the way that regulation has gone throughout the last 50 years, I guess. I can't tell someone not to invest in technology. I can caution them, but I think I think telling people that they can't use technology, and the issue is with an ICO for me is you actually don't get any equity. It's just the ability to buy into the right to be in an ecosystem, or to so I think that's what regulators have really grappled with, is the fact that you don't get an equity part of this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, right?
Yeah.
There's always that danger where we've all got that probably more gullible friend or relative who would probably stumble into one of these rooms, or they heard it in, and they're sold something that they have no idea, they don't understand, and that's kind of where we draw the bottom line. Yeah. But to the points about what Korea is doing, what all these smaller jurisdictions are doing, I feel like we're kind of ignoring the elephant in the room, which is China, right? It's a worst kept secret that China has, crypto and blockchain is well alive and thriving in China. And I see jurisdictions like that leading the way in legislation, and other people will look to that because liquidity is the lifeblood of the space. And if all the liquidity is in the East and it's coming from investors in the East, then you've got to look to where people are investing and the money's coming from. And we're looking at China. I mean, for us, it's an important place. We've set up an office and a presence there. We just can't ignore it anymore. Mm-hmm. But it's also kind of counterintuitive when people think that, China's banning everything. It makes no sense that a country that wants to digitalize the renminbi to create the effect of a more dominant sovereign currency globally would want to tamper with the most revolutionary technology that could take it global, right? Dominate trade through digital renminbi. So they're never going to ban it there outright. And people have to kind of see the binary effect of this, that it's always going to thrive in places where liquidity is.
Things are not as they seem. Right?
They are not as they seem.
Maja, I'm sure you have to.
I want to piggyback on Loretta's point, because I think it's so important. My experiences working with governments around the world, it started off, as I said, really early in my early 20s, but last 2 experiences in this space is we held a roundtable for a lot of regulators in DC, and the second one was Bretton Woods meeting, which is where the U.S. economic or world economic system really got created. And this year's conversation was heavily around crypto and what currency means and what is currency. And I think to Loretta's point, right, it's really difficult, but a lot of these regulators are still way behind in their thinking of what this actually means. And another point, another spin-off that I talk about quite a lot, which is we talk about access to crypto, and we're in this room and most of us have crypto or have been investing in crypto and et cetera. But not everybody, nowhere near in the world has access to getting educated around this technology. And that is what is key, right? So yes, technology, like Loretta said, right? Regulators are not going to, they can only caution you onto something, but it can't stop you from investing. And so people that are in this room, and this is where I talk about this continuously, is blockchain is not going to solve all the world's problems that we claim it's going to solve, right? You have to consciously design a process that will actually fix that problem. And so same thing with investing, right? You will consciously have to educate your investors around what they're investing in. And if you don't, Samuel is right? It will come and haunt you at some point, and we're going to see that more and more. I mean, we're seeing it in some of our investments, and we're going to keep seeing it. Now, on the last point on the regulator side, I also give him some credit, because if I look at some of the structuring that we've done in our tokens, there is no way that you can predict what this will be 3-4 years down the line. Because if there is a strong utility to that token, as Samuel said, and there's a really strong utility and a network effect and a usage and a value that the community is driving from that, that's fantastic, and the chances are that will succeed. But regulators can't sit there, and I'm quite vocal about it, to say, let me design a rule and pass it into a law that will regulate something 6 years from now, i.e. regulating Amazon in 1980s, which didn't exist, right? It's crazy talk. So that's kind of what, we got to step aside from this, what's a security, what's a utility, and really ask a fundamental question. Like, what are we driving here, and what are you part of as you're building these companies or investing in these companies, right?
I mean, sorry, it feels iterative. I've been through this a few times now. When I was doing e-commerce in Southeast Asia, like early 2010, there was nothing in place. Same thing, they had to build it up. It was chock-a-block, it was terrible. They had to make multiple revisions of it. Then I did Uber. I was building Uber out, same thing. But there are some jurisdictions that have led the way in this space, right? I think it's really easy to shit on the regulators, but I think some places are working really hard to like catch up.
Jumping in defense of the regulators here.
No, for sure. For example, the Philippines, right? Yeah. They have some really fancy, like Harvard-educated, trigger-happy legislators who have put in place VC legislation for the last 3 years. Shout out to the Philippines. And they've had that. It's woefully inadequate, and they know it. But they put it in place because they saw the industry was booming. The country has a massive casino and sports betting industry, so that crypto naturally thrived there. And they've had that for 3 years. It's phenomenal. And it was informed upon by two of the biggest crypto players there, by Coins.ph and SCI, Satoshi Digital Industries. Both of them haven't done ICOs. They were running like crypto access businesses, exchanges and whatnot. But now they're building it up, getting more people in, building special economic zones, CESA for one example. I think there's a lot going on that we can take as thought leadership in this space, and it's encouraging. It's best foot forward.
I think that's maybe a good example, but also, and to the point of Maja, I think the regulators have to follow, right? I mean, this is what we all keep saying, and then Samuel, you said you're optimistic on that side, and that kind of approach. Can that be done a little bit faster, especially, or I don't know, better in some other way? It doesn't have to be Korea, it can be any ecosystem, but especially from the perspective of, let's think of a startup that's having a very good utility product that we, for example, mentioned, a hypothetical one that to bring clarity to them, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, like, legislation is not a very, mathematical process. It takes a lot of trial and error. You'll have a legislation, and then you'll test the market, see how it works, and then there's a lot of problems, and you'll tweak the law through the legislative process. But what's more challenging with blockchain and crypto is for you to legislate or have sensible legal laws on this, you have to understand the technology as well. That's really hard. At my firm, I have some of the smartest people in Korea, and trying to understand the technology is another, study area right there, and then try the tech and the law. And so it's really, I think, in certain ways unfair for the legislators, or the regulators to try to, say, hey, you gotta learn this now, because, we're losing time. Innovation is key right now. But I think the message the regulators got is they do want to learn, they do want to try, because they do recognize as a form of the government's policies to, allow this technology to grow and become for Korea to be a leader. But understand the tech. I'm learning every day. The tech changes every day. Ethereum, like 4 months ago, is different from Ethereum today and what they're trying to do. And so I think in that respect, but we'll have a legislation. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to have points where you're like, oh, why did they do that? But we're going to tweak it, adjust it, and then after the market matures, the legislation will adjust to the market itself.
Nick, can I just,
Yes,
I think
please.
that's a perfect example of where communication breaks down. So as part of hacker group that I was while we were doing telecom in Africa, a lot of those guys, and I'm sure there are a lot of guys in this room, and girls, or people that are part of, Satoshi's Roundtable or other places that truly believe that jobs like, Loretta's or Samuel's and further, right, and SEC should just not exist, right? And we should just do away with the government, and we should just do away with the fiat. That's not going to happen, by the way. And that we should, do all of this, and we should just create our own rules and regulation. They've got to come together and speak, right? No regulator I've seen has invited these crypto smart folks or hackers and et cetera to actually have a conversation with them, because these folks that are sitting in nice suits think they know it all because they created a bunch of legislation. And the guys, same on the other side, who are hackers and mathematicians and cryptographers, think they're the smartest bunch, in the world. And they can't find that communication because they're too stuck in their own egos rather than creating a better world for all of us, which, by the way, was Satoshi's idea when he or she or they created this. And so I think that's a perfect example of where we're missing, and it's a breakdown in communication. And we can't just live in this world because, by the way, both are going to exist. So I don't see it do away with the government or fiat, and I don't see hackers going away, right? So.
To that point, that's really interesting because I think I sit in that bridge, and I came from a very regulated market. I was a banker for many years, and I don't see the world of centralisation, the middlemen, the banks that I work for since the GFC. Centralisation doesn't work. But I also don't believe the world of anarchy and decentralisation works in the world we live in. So that's what my job has been in the last few years, to somewhere sit in the middle. And you're so right. I mean, I take in Bitcoin protocol developers and people into central banks and into regulators and into the financial stability and FATF and regulators, and I put them in front of them, and they would never meet. These two worlds normally never meet. But for me, it's been a perfect storm in the last couple of years, because when you put them in a room, and if the internet taught us all something, it's that we have to collaborate. Because two extremes, exponential, just don't work. And regulation is really slow. Innovation that I've seen in the space, I used to go into regulators in 2013. They thought I was mad. They were like, Loretta, go away, this is not going to happen. In the last year, innovation and the amount of money that's come into ICOs means that nobody can ignore this. And regulation, it at least needs to move in line with innovation, because over-regulation is really bad. No regulation, to me, is worse. So I would hope now, in 2018, that we as the ecosystem, we as governments, as regulators, can all actually work together to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes of the internet.
But at the same time, I mean, just as an example, I was in a restaurant recently in Singapore, and I just overheard the conversation next to me. There was a couple on a date, and the guy was trying to explain blockchain to the girl, and it was clearly, it was killing it. It was not happening. But I mean, taking that as an example.
A Tinder date or what?
I don't know, could be. The point being, something we were discussing in the speaker room earlier, you start to talk to people about this and they just glaze over, right? There's a lot of people in this space who are rather poor at representing crypto and blockchain and what it really represents for the world. It's sort of step change for society. And if legislators aren't going to be able to understand, comprehend, or listen, it's often because people aren't building things that others will use, right? Without those use cases, I mean, people go on and on and on about use cases, but we're not even at that stage where you've got mass adoption, network effects, and people actually saying, hey, this is useful to me, I want it. And when there's a crowd of people like clamoring outside the door saying, this is something I want and need, and you're shutting it down, that's when things start to change. And I went through this once before. I was at Uber, and they shut us down like at least 10 times when we were building out. All over Southeast Asia. I used to have to sit outside the regulator's door, waiting for him to get out in the morning, and it's like, hey, sign this, but it was iterative as well. I mean, we tried to be as collaborative with them, bringing the thought leadership, the technicals to the table, and understanding where we were affecting society, but it was a usable product, right? You press a button, the car comes. Yeah. Once we get beyond this being just a protocol layer and in people's hands, that's when the crowd will clamor for it. Right now, it's just a mob.
We're kind of running slowly out of time. I have a it's maybe best to have a one-word answer here. If you were like having a product, let's say, for the sake of the argument, we are in Korea right now, if you were like a young, brilliant Korean entrepreneur and you had a great blockchain project with a great utility aspect of it, and you have an opportunity for an ICO, where would you do it, and how would you go about it? In which jurisdiction would you do it? Like, in your opinion, basically, what is the most advanced? I know, Loretta, your answer probably. What is the most advanced regulatory and most safe regulatory environment for you to proceed and talk to the regulators, talk to the investors, and make sure that everything works out?
It's a tough one to answer. I'd say
that's why we're keeping it.
Singapore is a relatively good place, and obviously I'm from there. I'm going to say that. Okay. But it feels like you think about your tax considerations one place, your domicile another, okay, your foundation in another. I think what you really need, regardless of which jurisdiction, is good legal counsel. Okay. For example, or finding good people who represent like balanced opinions in the space who are close to the regulator themselves. I would be hunting for good representation rather than jurisdiction. Right. That's more important to me.
Maja?
I think, I guess because I'm coming from mobile tech space and payments, a lot of power work as well, electricity, but I think I would focus on where there is the most amount of friction that actually has a utility for basic user walking around, right? To your point, Uber was one little click and a car is right there, right? So what is that friction that you'd be taking out with your token out of a system that you could be designing? Jurisdiction? I don't know. I think it's, to your point, it's complicated. It doesn't matter where you do it. You're going to have to set up 2-3 different entities. I think you just focus. I always say to my clients, and I always look into projects, which is, what is the value that you're bringing and that you're building? What is the value? Is there a value? If there's no value, then we can just, we can tease this out all along. I think what's interesting to me right now is telecoms, because telecoms around the world, particularly in emerging markets or in places like Africa or Latin America, Asia, where they have an opportunity to become a next banking layer, right? Banks are too regulated, too complex to access this. And our focus right now, we're working with some large family offices around the world, is to look at that layer of telecom as the next banking system. And that's fascinating because we're working on a project right now that could potentially give a savings account to people, the billions of people around the world who are not banked and don't care about the bank. And by the way, bank doesn't care about them. And so this could give access and a potential of a savings account. And that's a massive opportunity.
Sure, one thing to add to that a lot of people don't realize or think about is that a lot of the fees in the space are inflated because of the lack of expertise. Yeah. So you consider your token economics of your project.
A lot of people are riding the wave, yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So there are lawyers out there charging, don't quote me on this, like $250,000 to $300,000 for an opinion letter.
And not just lawyers, we're talking about everything, events, consultancies,
exactly.
marketing.
And then that gets baked into the amount of money you need to raise. Yeah. So that screws with the token economics and the distribution model and the use cases that you have for it. So until those start to compress, I think we're going to have very inflated raises because people are being advised, hey, you need to add an extra couple $1 million for you to pay this guy and this guy and this
marketing.
Yeah. Precisely. I'm not saying that cottage industry doesn't need to exist, but being that it's inflated right now, it's resulted in some rather skewed outcomes, I think, that a lot of people don't really measure or look at.
Back to the ideal kind of place for you to operate, Loretta, is this a simple answer for you?
I'm going to say Bermuda, but no, it is great. It's beautiful too, by the way. No, but my other thing is, and we haven't touched on it here, it's if you're an entrepreneur and you're in blockchain or crypto, the biggest problem for you at the moment is getting a bank account. Let's be honest. It's the big global problem. So you need to go to a jurisdiction that you can have an operational bank account. That to me, is the biggest problem that we face in the space. So working on it. If you can find a jurisdiction, you can do that, go for it.
Samuel?
The only thing I could tell you is where are the popular destinations that clients choose, and I think from my experience, it's been Singapore and Asia, at least for the Korean clients, and so I think part of it's because it's not regulated and it's very easy to set up a company there, just pay your taxes. and whatnot. I just want to actually touch upon a little bit before we end regarding the common question in ICOs, is my token a utility or is my token a security? And that's one of the common things that we get. And there is no this is uncharted territory in terms of legal analysis, and so it is very new for everybody right now. But I think a common way, the common example I give is I have kids, and my kids love Pokemon coins, right? And when I buy these coins, I know I'm losing money. I'm buying it purely for consumption, right? Other than that, if there's an expectation of profit for me to purchase these tokens, then you're at risk of labeling it as a security, even though the underlying token is for a utility value right now. And so, that's just a very common bright line test on whether to test, if something's a security or not. And unfortunately or fortunately, that's primarily based on US jurisprudence on the Howey test. And so it's something to consider when you do ICOs.
But I think you're very right on that point. I mean, if you try to make money.
I know you want to do the Q&A, but Loretta nailed it, right? Yeah. When people are doing the ICOs, they're not thinking, hey, how do I help the regulator come up with better regulations so I can do this easier? They're thinking, for me, right? What's the problem? I can't open a bank account. And that's exactly it. That's the first thing people think about. For us running a trading desk in OTC, we work with about 20 crypto-friendly banks around the world. And it is painful. It is, some of them use fax machines, some of them are really behind.
Are they in Japan?
I'm not going to name names. But that being said, we have a team in-house, and all they do is open bank accounts and open entities. And it feels like, even back in 2014, when people were starting up this industry, into the new ICOs, they were running around from bank to bank to bank, creating fail-safes so that when one got shut down, they'd have another ready. It's really, really challenging, and that's one of the first problems to solve. But just tangential to that is something we say as a fund, and people have asked us for a long time. It's like, at the end of the day, fiat is going to start looking a lot more like crypto. It's going to take on a lot more of the dynamics and the features and what crypto has, what blockchain has. So I think that's going to be a huge boon to the industry and for banks to eventually start to provide custody services, third-party. I mean, I go on and on about this, but
so basically, a lot of this regulatory aspects, and when I talk to people, we kind of all agree we need more time and work together. That's overall. But I would assume there are some questions. Does anyone have any questions? Can you please come to the mic here in front and then introduce? Oh yeah, there's one as well. And introduce yourself and be quite brief because they're going to kick us off the stage at some point really soon.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm Regi from Haratoken, Indonesia.
Yeah.
So Indonesia is really greenfield in terms of blockchain and ICO. There's less than 5 ICO happening in Indonesia. So we have a luxury to talk with central bank. So we need your advice. What should we do in order to have a good environment and discussion with government to embrace the blockchain and crypto ecosystem?
Who wants
the Hara guys were in my office recently, so I've met your co-founder as well.
Yeah.
I mean, in Indonesia, it's recently classified as a commodity, if I'm not mistaken, and the legislative landscape in your country is tough, to say the least. The central bank is stifling. There are very few institutions that are willing to stick their neck out for you to provide you the supportive services. I think a lot of the Indonesian projects we work with, they obviously come over to Singapore to do, so they don't have to deal with that headache. They don't see it as their problem. That's kind of been the outcome so far. There's very little thought leadership community in Indonesia right now. There's a few associations that are trying to get in the space and communicate with the SEC and the local central bank. But it's one where there's just no attention paid to it at the moment. They only want to, get rid of fraud.
Here's the advice. Know what you're asking from the government. That's all great, but reality is that's still fluffy and broad. Like, what are you asking them to do, right? Why just, let me just go to the government and have them work on blockchain and crypto? I mean, this is what everybody's doing. It's not going to solve anything that broad. What are you trying to get them to change? Are you trying to open up something for a certain population? Are you trying to take a friction out of it? Are you trying to have them do manufacturing differently? Are you trying to have them, do power plants and solar and prosumers and consumers? Like, what are you trying to do? And this is what you see a lot in crypto, right? Guys wake up and make shitloads of money, and they haven't done anything, right? So what are you trying to do? Where is the value? what are you driving and what are you asking government to do? And I bet you they will respond in a much more efficient way.
In Indo, it's dig it, like bit by bit, right? Get some social media stars to stand behind you. That's how it works in Indonesia.
So, obviously, yeah, public sectors everywhere are different. People work in different ways. But I mean, you have to find a way how to. Loretta, you want?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that. Find a use case that the government will work with you on, because that's the biggest thing. If it's, you know, if you've got projects that people don't understand, working with governments is important. It's not the be-all and end-all, but find something that is a really good use case.
Something that probably the government would also care about, something that solves their problem would be probably. Is any more questions? We maybe can squeeze in one more. Can you come here forward, please? And then we squeeze one more before they really kick us off the stage.
Give a mic here.
Here, there's a mic left and right of the stage.
Okay, hi. My name is Ronald. I'm a CEO, co-founder of Hockey Network, and we're based in Singapore, US, and Vietnam. So I like to ask a very realistic question. We are doing a decentralized payment, so we are trying to apply the licenses around the world, such as Malta, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, Singapore, Zug, and all these countries. And we are facing hard time to get the specific money remittance license. And you know, we like to go directly to the governments, or we go through the agencies. So it takes us like already 2 months. So I'm not sure what should be the best direction for us to go through.
A Loretta answer.
I think, yeah.
Well, I think you look at all your choices, I guess, but for me it's going to a jurisdiction that lets you scale, that lets you set up and has clear defined laws about what you can do and what you can't do.
Anything comes to mind right now? Any jurisdiction? No.
I sound really biased.
No. Sorry. Yeah.
Mauritius, Malta or Bermuda.
Yeah.
She's uniquely qualified to answer that, by the way. She's one of the advisors to our fund as well. We've been trying to keep track of Loretta. She's on like 4 countries a week.
I'm
And she'll
decentralized.
pick up the phone, she's like, I'm in Paris, I'm in Bermuda, I'm in Malta, like every week. But she's pretty uniquely placed from her previous background as well, so if you need advice.
Yeah, you can
Ask
talk to me
Loretta.
after.
Okay, let's conclude really briefly, literally half a sentence each. Where will we be in 5 years from now? I know it's ridiculous to make predictions in the crypto world. Okay, let's make it 2 years from now. In terms of regulatory, maybe from your own experience or your own jurisdiction, whether it's Korea or Bermuda or the US or Singapore, or generally globally, do you think we're going to make, what is the landscape going to be regulatory on an average global level even about a couple of years from now?
I mean,
Yeah,
fingers crossed it won't be as big an issue as it is now in 5 years. I think the main players providing liquidity in East Asia will have come up with some very viable solutions to bring funds into the space, institutional money. By that point in time, I think we'll be dealing with a whole different set of problems, more to do with regulating within the technology as opposed to regulating how you build it and set it up and get investors in. And at the end of the day, this is something most people don't think about, but like smart contract, it's still contract law, right? Offer acceptance, consideration. It's not enforceable without laws in place. So there's always going to be the fundamentals there. There's always going to be centralized governance, in my opinion. And 5 years from now, hopefully, we're not struggling as much.
Maya?
I don't know where we'll be, but I do know that we're not in the U.S. entering a good economic system now. We're not. I'm afraid of just a recession in the next 2 years or 3 years, and I think with that you will have also an effect to cryptocurrencies. I think we'll have a really good run at crypto next couple months, and then I'm afraid we'll see some backlash. So in terms of where we are with the regulation, we'll move forward. There's going to be some maybe laws passed. Definitely some action from SEC on some of the ICOs out there who've done some interesting things, let's say. But I think that's still up. 2 years is very short. I've seen some of the pilots. I've created pilots at General Electric across all the industries, and I mean, we are far away from this technology being scalable. So in exchanges and in crypto, maybe you'll start to see some of it. But 2 years is very short.
We might see some people in prison too. 5 years.
Samuel, Loretta, last words before it's very...
I really have no idea where the law is going to go, but I think if I was a betting man, I think we're going to have current laws altered to accommodate the cryptocurrency regulations. So I think it's going to be a a subset under the securities laws, a subset under the FX laws, banking laws, and so, somehow they're going to work together in that respect. Law doesn't like to change drastically, and I think we're going to see incremental changes. And then I think 5 years from now, we'll have some sort of stable form where the market has matured, and then there'll be more, usage of that and understanding how do we deal with it.
Looking on 5 years from now.
I think the world will be much more harmonised. I think the adoption, what we're seeing now of regulations as legislation can go to, hopefully, my vision is all the Commonwealth countries. And in 5 years, the protocols that have been developed as the technology will be all joined, like the internet, and we won't even be thinking about it. We'll just use blockchain like we do our email.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, very much for this great panel. Our panelists are around here for the rest of the event, most of you, so you can probably talk to them outside or in the exhibition area during lunch. I would like to thank them with a round of applause, and thank you very much.